Okay, in today lecture, we will learn or discuss about the concepts of causation, how we relate a cause with uh, what is a cause and the effect. Okay, let's start with prayer first. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. May the Holy Triune God live and reign in our hearts and in the hearts of all people. Amen. May the darkness of sin and the night of unbelief vanish before the light of the Word and the Spirit of grace. May the heart of Jesus live and in the hearts of all people. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. In the scientific method, yeah, we do uh, study with some. I'm talking about uh, general scientific method for population health study. So usually we take some sample that represent the population of interest. We take the sample and then we made a conclusion about the population using the sample, and then we try to have a conclusion about the scientific theory. So from the first step to the second step, we do a statistical inference. And then from the second step to the third step, we do biological inference. At the first stage, we select a group of subjects for study. So we select some participants, some samples uh, from a population of interest. A population of interest, meaning that especially in the study for pharmacoepidemiology, we usually use a kind of a subpopulation. We are we interested in the in adult sub participants or populations, or are we interested in the pregnant women and so on? And then we select some of those population of interest, and then we try to approach them and ask them whether they agree to join our research. And it is because it's mostly impossible to gather all member of the population of the interest. So we just take some sample and we then make a conclusion from them as a kind of proxy to as a conclusion for the population. And there are some sampling methods such as the convenience sampling, and then the in general the sampling methods are divided into two categories: the probability sampling and the non-probability sampling. uh, in probability sampling, we can use simple random sampling. That's the easy one, but not that easy actually. And then we can do also systematic sampling, and then cluster sampling, and also mix sampling using several probability sampling. And we can the second group of sampling is the non-probability sampling. In some techniques in that sampling can be purposive sampling and then convenience sampling, also chunk sampling, as well as the wait, like some of the purposive sampling can be snowball sampling. So we start for the snowball sampling. We start from a uh, s- small number of subjects, one or two, and then we follow their direction to get another subject. Usually, this is for a sensitive topic. Then the second stage, we usually generalize and draw a conclusion using the information from the samples. And here we can use a statistical analysis that use not the usually not the desk. We can use descriptive analysis as well as the inferential statistics that use some procedures to get the hypothesis, to do the hypothesis testing. And then the process stops actually here in the second step when the statistical analysis find no significant value. So we cannot uh, continue to the third stage if we do not find any significant value. But most oftenly in pharmacoepidemiologic research, we may find significant value. If we do not find a significant value, then we should evaluate about our methods, how we conduct our study, whether we do some mistakes, uh, or we can call it as a bias during the selection as well as the analysis. Then we, if it's applicable, we can repeat the procedure to what is it, to have a better data, to take a better data, to collect better data, and then to analyze, reanalyze the new data. Okay, and then the third step, the third stage, we if we find a significant value, then we can repeat it we can repeat the generalization and conclusion about scientific theory or causation. So we use the current theory or the current knowledge. So we check the literature, the body of literature, to find any explanation about why uh, the topics that we have studied can yield a significant result. And then we try to make an explanation how the mechanism and so on. Then with that, we are doing a biological inference. So this is a simple chart to in clinical studies to which is to give a description about how an RCT, a randomized clinical trial, is conducted. So this is a scheme for an RCT of the efficacy of enalapril in lowering blood pressure. For example, our population of interest to test the enalapril is middle age patients, so patients with hypertension to be exact. And then we select, usually uh, we open a registration to participate in this trial. And then, but before that, we have to, usually we have to register our trial to a system such as the one of the clinical trial registry, by the government of the US, I think, yeah, the clinicaltrials.gov.gov, yeah. And then we just we check out the eligibility criteria. Uh, let's say we check the 40 middle age, or yeah, patients with hypertension. And then after that, we uh, we we do a randomization. We randomize them into two groups: the treatment and also the placebo group, or we call it as a control group. And then we select in the same. Usually, the we call it this two groups as, sometimes we call it as arms. Yeah, arms. So what usually both arms will contain the same size or the same number of participants. Uh, but uh, it can be like this. The control group or the placebo group contains more participants than the treatment group. So we call this the result of the randomization as a baseline, and then we usually try to collect their baseline data, such as their age or age group, and then their sex, as well as their blood pressure, initial blood pressures, and as well the comorbidities, and so on. And also probably their diet that may affect the hypertension, and so on. And then we follow each group uh, for 6 weeks, yeah, for 6 weeks, and then we evaluate routinely their blood pressure after which is taking the enalapril. And then after that we compare the the difference between the treatment group as well as the control group in terms of the reduction of blood pressure. If we can find a good which is a good result, significant result from this test, from this trial, then we can go so we can fulfill the second stage of the scientific methods, and then we can go to the third stage. So if you have any question, just raise your hand or just open your mic to ask me. So in reality, the study sample is almost never a true random sample. Why? Because it is very difficult actually to throw a sample from the population of interest in uh, in an ideal random uh, way. Because uh, in even in the let me talk about a bit about the sampling methods. Uh, there is a simple random sampling that is part of, like what I said before, the probability sampling. So the simple random sampling may can be a bit difficult. For example, I select if I want to do a sampling method using simple random sampling, so what I will do, what I will do is, like, for example, I will use the population of students at the Department of Pharmacy at USC, and then to do the simple random sampling, I need to have their phone numbers, all of their phone numbers, as well as their student numbers. And then after that, I will uh, take a random sample from the user, for example, from the voices from the student numbers. I will just take, for example, 30 to 40 of them, and then I call them. So in simple random sampling, all member of the target population must have the same chance to be selected as a participant, as a sample. So yeah, so that's the thing, because we our if our target population is in the general population, for example, the adult population with hypertension in Cebu City, then if we want to do a simple random sampling, then we have to know how many people, and then what kind of identification that we can use to select them uh, by random sampling, randomly. We can select them randomly. It's not easy because in the past, people may use in the past, usually the researchers use the uh, telephone numbers, home phone numbers. So using the phone book, but right now, it is not easy to have uh, kind of a phone book for mobile phone numbers. So it's not easy. Like the name is actually simple random sampling, but it's not really simple to to be conducted. So usually the study sample is usually treated as it were random sample of the target population. So when we want to do an RCT in Cebu City, then we will recruit the participants by opening or opening an advertisement. So we will announce the our trial, and then ask those who are eligible to participate to to register to submit their details to us, and then we select it. We can call it as you know the random samples. And this random sampling method, it is kind of different with the randomization that I talked before. This one. So random sampling should happen before we select the eligible participants. So the randomization is that we randomize, we can draw what is it, a card or something like that for those for those who are selected as a participant, the eligible participants. So randomization means just we divided the eligible participants to the treatment group or the control group. Okay. And then about the generalization, so we may have a kind of uh, problem in terms of if we want to make a generalization, but as long as we stick to the procedures and our procedures are correct, then we can have generalizations for our population of interest. For example, if our study result is that enalapril lowers blood pressure in middle-aged patients with hypertension from our sample, then we can say that in all uh, middle-aged patients with hypertension, uh, the enalapril will do the same. Okay, and then could the results have occurred simply by chance or random variation? Yeah, it could be. But by using the inferential statistics, we uh, want to reduce the probability that our result uh, occurred because by chance, because of by chance. And then, yeah, so this is a bit from the explanation before. If there is no statistically significant difference from treatment and placebo group, then the process stops. Oh yeah, I want to uh, so like what I said before, by the end of the study period, we want to know whether the treatment group is better than the uh, control group in terms of lowering the blood pressure. Using this design, we can, because using this kind of design, we can control what kind of factors that may affect the blood pressure. So uh, if if we find a significant difference where the means of blood pressure among the participants of the treatment group is lower than the control group, then we can say confidently that the blood pressure reduction is because of enalapril. So this design, the randomized clinical trial, is a strong design to have to evaluate the cause, the a cause and an effect, the relationship, the causal relationship between a cause and an effect. So why? Because there is no others. We can control the other factors that may affect the blood pressures, uh, but some of them may not be able to be controlled, such as the level of stress and so on, their working condition, and so. But yeah, when we can control it, then we can say confidently that uh, the cause of uh, the cause of the good results is the consumption of or the administration of enalapril, not the placebo. Okay, so I am hoping that you understand this. And then if there is an association, we can say association, but we also can say a difference here, a significant difference. We can say the significant difference as an association as well, because it depends on the statistical methods that we use. Then we need to further generalization and conclusion drawing that enalapril is an anti-hypertensive drug in general. So we need to dig the literature, the current body of literature, to explain how the enalapril, an ACE inhibitor, can lower the drug. What is the mechanism behind as well? Yeah, so we then have a causation. Okay, for the biological inference, this is unlike statistical inference, and there are no precise quantitative rules. So usually with the statistical inference, we use, for example, the p-value or the p-value of less than 0.05 to draw whether an association is significant or a difference is significant or not. But in biological inference, we do not use that kind of approach. We can use also the quantitative rules, but it can also be qualitative. So, uh, so actually, what we do is to answer why we have a difference, a significant difference, and why we have a significant association using the current scientific literature. So usually the result from our biological inference can be debatable. If we find something that is which is like a breakthrough or a kind of a difference from the our general knowledge, then uh, any expert in this world, in the academic world, can challenge us about, yeah, our conclusion, our biological inference. And I have talked to a colleague that actually uh, find in the past, he found something that is very, you know, is very uncommon in his field of research. And then he was challenged by scientists from all over the world. So they come, and then so my friend, my colleague, invited them to go to his project, and then he explained everything related to his findings. And so I think he's my idol in terms of research, in terms of perseverance. So uh, his article is published in Nature, and he has some articles that are then also published in Nature. Okay, and there are some criteria that that have to be fulfilled to make a causation, uh, or to make to draw a conclusion that is causations or causal associations. And I don't know if it is here. So yeah, here. And there are some criteria. There are 5 criteria here, and it is actually drawn from the Bradford Hill criteria. Bradford Hill criteria. There are 9 Bradford Hill criteria, and it is very popular in biology, sorry, in epidemiology, and then it can be a kind of guidance to draw whether a cause may have a causal relationship with an effect. So Theoretically, uh, the first criterion is the coherence with existing information. But uh, although although we may find something that is not current, not in the current mainstream, uh, we can we can still use some of the existing knowledge, existing information to support our new theory. And then uh, the second one is about the consistency of the association. Probably we need to kind of repeat or continue our research or to prove that our research is consistent in terms of the results. So usually there is a big question: is the math is uh, are the methods that we use uh, reliable or valid or not? So yeah, we have to prove that. And then the time sequence or uh, the temporality. So in this RCT, in the previous example about this RCT, the enalapril RCT, we are sure about the temporality because the enalapril as a cause happens before the results, before the effect. So that's what does mean with the temporality. So a cause must appear before an effect. So yeah, if we can prove that the cause is happens before the effect, then we may have the time sequence. And then the specificity of the association and the strength of the association. This can be a quantitative strength. For example, we can talk about uh, the number of samples that we use to draw the conclusion, and any other quantitative strength that is related to our study. And then in terms of the use of drug, we can use dose response relationship. So dose response relationship, meaning that uh, there is what is it? A strong relation between the effect and then the level of dose that we use in the research, and also the study design. In clinical studies, the RCT may have the best design to draw conclusions, but we have some analytical and also observational studies that we will learn them next week or the week after next week. That but uh, the other study designs are lower in terms of strength. Then here is the table. So if we have randomized control trial designs, this is very expensive because we uh, kind of doing an experiment to the participants. Then we have to provide a kind of health insurance to prevent to anticipate uh, something was happen to the participants. So the ability to prove causations is strong for the RCT. For the cohort and case control studies are moderate, and then for the other studies are weak. So by this, yeah, we if we read a paper, we need to know what is the study design. Then we may have a kind of level of level of confidence to talk about the topic using that reference. And then next uh, we will talk about the other associations than the causal associations. We may have a non or independent association, meaning that there is no association between the cause and the effect of interest. And then the second one is the artifactual, the spurious or false association. We may have chance as well as bias. I will explain in the next slide. And then we may have indirect or confounded associations. For the artifactual associations, we may have chance or bias. The chance is the unsystematic or random variation. So we may find a chance or false associations, but not by design, not what we are intended to have the bias, the error. But in bias, uh, we are facing a kind of systematic variations. So because it is systematic, then we have a big problem, uh, because it can be called systematic because between one participants to another participants in our sample, we may we may make error in terms of measuring them, as well as uh, measuring the the output for the outcome of the study, because it can be because of the error in the instruments, error in the observers, and so on. So we call it as a bias. Also, there are a lot of types of bias. For example, there is an interviewer bias or recall bias. Interviewer bias, let's say, probably the interviewer may have a kind of card of a list of a card that contains list of questions, but some interviewer may, because the style of interview is different from one to the other, probably they will go to another questions, and then so we may have a different data, or probably there is a kind of a like and dislike to the participants because of the attitudes of the participants, probably. Then it can be called as interview bias. While the recall bias, we may have a kind of, for the recall bias, it is related to the memories of the participants. For some events, uh, participants may have a strong memory about it, but for other events, the participants may not be able to remember. So just for a kind of a little bit of practice, if I ask you, what did you do uh, on Monday 2 weeks before this week, then you may already forget what did you do. So that kind of thing is called as recall bias. But because probably uh, you did not do something that is very interesting or very exciting at the time, or a particular event that is exciting. But if uh, let's say you have visited Disneyland a month ago, I think you still remember. So this yes. Okay, and then it should be noted that a statistically significant result is not a protection against a bias, but a proper study design is. So if we want to, this is to protect our study results from any kind of bias, then we need to really scrutinize our study design. That's the key of the population health research. So there are some types of errors that there is indirect and then confounded association. This is another type of association. Yeah, the a confounding variable or a confounder is a variable other than the risk factor and other than the outcome under study, which is related independently to both the risk factor and the outcome, and which may create an apparent association or mask a real one. So these are the classic examples. For example, the lung cancer, yellow fingertips, and smoking. So the yellow uh, lung cancer is associated with yellow fingertips, but it is not that the yellow fingertips causes yellow fingertips cause a lung cancer, but usually uh, among those who have yellow fingertips, there are smokers. So smoking that is actually correlated directly to the lung cancer, not the yellow fingertips with lung cancer. So here, the yellow fingertips can be said as a confounder. So in RCT, uh, especially, we need to control for any kind of confounder. So for example, for our uh, previous example about the RCT of enalapril, we may control any kind of confounder that can affect the effect of enalapril in terms of lowering blood pressure. For example, like what I said before, the types of diet, yeah, whether uh, the participants in the both in the control and uh, study group consume different kind of foods or diets, and then whether they have they have a kind of similar stress level. It depends on their job or working status and so on, whether they have the same economic level that may also uh, was it associated with the stress and then the blood pressure. Okay, and there is something that you need to know about the confounding by indication. Confounding by indication is a confounder that is part of the development or the progressions of a disease. For example, this is very important, especially in the pharmacovigilance study. In pharmacovigilance study, we are interested to study the adverse effect of a drug of choice, for example. So, for example, we develop a new drug for diabetes, and then we found that and then we find that some of the uh, some of the patients that take the this new anti-diabetes may develop a kind of uh, the acute renal failure. Then we want to know, uh, but uh, on the other hand, we know that the diabetes itself may cause the acute acute renal failure. So we need to know it is so this kind of thing is called as confounding by indication. We need to know whether the drug that causes the uh, voices acute kidney failure or the progression of the diabetes that can cause the acute renal failure. So yeah, so I'm hoping that you understand what I'm saying. Okay, so we have three kind of errors. It can be the random error, bias. For random error, we are okay. It's okay, and then bias, for bias and confounding, we have to be very careful. For to control the confounding, we can use a random allocation. So like what I said before, this is random allocation is the randomization, and then the subject selection using the exclusion and matching. Matching is a technique to find the member of one group that has the same characteristic with the, the member in another group or in another arm. And then using the data analysis, we can use the stratification and then also mathematical modeling. So I think that's all that I can share to you. And then please, if you have any questions, we may have some time to discuss. Do you have any other lecture today after this? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 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 Is there any question?
None so far, sir.
The other?
None, sir.
Huh? Okay. If there is no
None,
question,
sir.
okay. But during your study, if you have any questions from any uh, meeting, any of our meetings, then you can ask. Okay. Okay. Good morning and see you next week. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thank you,
sir.
sir.